Hello, I'm Liardon, and welcome to God's Journal as the Heathen Evangelist. In 1947, just after World War II had ended, and they were still beginning the reconstruction process on Europe, and then soon to deal with the Asiatic problems of the war. In 1947, two young lions came roaring out of the unknown parts of America that would become the dominant voices of Christianity in America and around the world from 1950 all the way into past the year 2000. Those two young lions was Oral Roberts and Billy Graham. Billy Graham coming on the scene with the main message that you must be born again, swept over our nation and then eventually around the world. A young man named Oral Roberts would come out of Oklahoma with this command from God: take my healing power to your generation. The man we're going to be studying today is the man named Oral Roberts. It's the picture of him here. Oral Roberts was my friend, and Oral Roberts was one of the men that I got to know personally in my life, so we'll be having a historical journey, and then we'll deviate in our study as I take you down my personal interaction with his wife, and his family. We are so glad that a man named Oral Roberts decided to obey God. So let's start his story, and let's begin the journey of how Oral Roberts became the great general that led our whole nation into healing evangelism and changed so much of the theology of the Pentecostal church world. We needed somebody that had a mind and a big spirit to pick up this little rustic crew called Pentecostals and push them down the road into the greatness that God had called them to be, and that is a man named Oral Roberts. In 1918, a woman named Claudius Priscilla, she was the mother of Oral Roberts, had been called on by a friend that a little girl was dying. Oral Roberts' mother, Claudius Priscilla, had faith for healing. In those days, in the early 1900s, not many people understood healing or prayed for the sick. It was more like if you got healed, it was one of those unusual moments where God sovereignly touched you. But she was pregnant with her last child, and she was going across the fields to pray for the little girl that was dying. And she began to talk to God as she crossed the field and went under the barbed wire fence as a thunderstorm was also on its way. Claudia, as she crawled under the barbed wire, she began to ask God and pray to God these words: if you'll heal the little girl today that I pray for, then the child that I carry, I will give to you, and you can have this child to do whatever you want with it. I will not have any claims. I will not have any emotional controls. I will support this child in the work that you may call them to do. And so as she come under the barbed wire fence and journey through the rain and the thunderstorm, she would get to the home and pray for the little girl. And that day, that little girl was healed. And Mama Roberts, as we would call her, kept her promise to God. Oral Roberts was born January 24th, 1918 in Ada, Oklahoma. His parents were Ellis and Claudius Roberts. Roberts' family had come from Wales in their history or their genealogy. They had got up and decided to leave Wales and move to the New World of America. They came and got off the boat and made their journeys into Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And after a while, the next generation came and decided they didn't want to live anymore in the South and all the troubles that were going on related to the Civil War. So they packed up all their wagons. There was no cars in those days. They packed up all their wagons, about 20 of them, and they left Alabama and got to central Arkansas and found some beautiful land and decided to build their own town, their own settlement in the middle of central Arkansas that they called Robertsville, which is still an existing town today. Isn't that kind of nice that there's a whole town just for your family and it still exists in modern times? And so that is the side of Oral's father that they came. They were people that were not very well-to-do, but they were good hard workers. They knew how to work the land. And Oral's mother was Cherokee Indian. And as time passed in those days, the Native Americans, there was a conflict with them in our culture at that time. But God had arranged for Ellis and Claudius to get together and form a great, great family that would give us the young man named Oral Roberts. When Oral Roberts was born, he was not born into the lap of luxury. He was born in the pain and the sting of poverty. He was born on the farm. He was born with not many shoes to wear. And he and his brother, as I'll show you the picture here, you can look at them and you can see in their faces They were little children that did not have a lot of joy, did not have a lot of things that they could enjoy, possessions, and sometimes even food was rough for them to have. But in this home, Mama Roberts and Oral's father would teach them the Bible. His dad would be a preacher. And Mama Roberts was a great prayer warrior. She was only about 5 foot tall. I remember her as a little boy going to her home there in Tulsa because my grandmother used to help take care of Oral's mother in her latter years. So we had interaction with Mother Roberts. She was a feisty little woman. She had the ability to move a crowd just in a few seconds when she would be introduced at times in Oral's future meetings. He said of her that she could take about 20 seconds and 10,000 people would be on their feet clapping and yelling and screaming and praising God. She had such a dynamic way about her and a way to talk. But she also had a very strong way to speak to her son Oral. She named him Granville Oral Roberts. The name Oral means the spoken word, and the word Roberts, or the name Roberts, means to shine with glorious fame. I think they named him right. A man that would speak the oracle of God and shine with God's glorious fame upon his life and his ministry. This little boy that was born to them could not speak properly. He was a stutterer. The great Oral Roberts could not clearly speak a sentence or to give a feeling with his words that did not cause trouble getting it out. He would be a stutterer. His uncle would tell his father, quit telling that young boy Oral that he's going to be a preacher. He can't even say his name. It's real sad when family can't encourage other family members and hold sometimes their own opinions to themselves. And if you can't speak anything good, then be quiet. But I guess the uncle didn't know that. But Mama Roberts one day found Oral running home from school because the bullies at school had been making fun of him and beating him up because he was a stutterer. He came home crying. The two sons came home, and she could hear the commotion as they're running down the road. She ran out to meet them, and Oral was crying as a little boy. She brought him into the living room and set him on her lap with her piercing eyes and her way of talking. She told Oral the story that I just told you. That she said to Oral, when I was pregnant with you, when you were inside of me, I prayed to God, and I asked God to give me a little boy who had black hair and blue eyes just like you. I prayed to God that if he would heal the little girl that was dying, that he could have you. And he healed the girl, and I've given you to God, and God has told me, you're going to preach to multitudes. It's God's going to take care of you. He's going to heal you, and you're going to do it. That set into Oral's young spirit that even though at that present he was poor, he was a stutterer, but somewhere the God of heaven and his mother had come into a covenant over his life that would steer him from his young years all the way to the end of his life. You know, many of us don't realize the power of being a parent. The greatest influence over your children should not be the public school system. It shouldn't be everybody else around them. Mom and dad, grandma and grandpa, aunts and uncles should be the main influence on the children that we bring into this world. All the other things are third and fourth, not first and second or third. We should have God. We should have the family. And then schools and so forth can be later. But in today's society, we have it backwards. If you want to produce a great general, get their childhood right. You become a part of their life. You show them. You teach them. They watch you do it because they will model your actions more than the words that you say. Oral's mother and father were men that, or was a family that lived what they preached, and they did what they knew that was right, and they were not mean people. They were not vengeful people. They were obedient people to God. Oral, as he grew up, did not like being poor, and he didn't like being a preacher's kid. A PK, as we call them. He didn't like any of that. He was tired of being made fun of. He was tired of not having enough food and enough proper clothes and education and so forth. And so at the age of 16, Oral Roberts decided to run away. He wanted to run away from God. He wanted to run away from his family. He wanted to run away from poverty and all that religious stuff. He wanted nothing to do with it. His goal was to become a lawyer and to become the governor of the great state of Oklahoma. That was his goals as a young man. And he knew he could not do that in the poverty and the religious structures that he grew up in. One night while he was playing basketball, like all young men, they get involved in sports and things when they're in school and with their friends, and Oral was a very good basketball player. He had run away from home with the basketball coach. He was leaving the town where he was and moving to another place, and Oral was invited by the coach to leave and go with him. The coach that took him was not a man that knew God. He was just a nice coach that saw Oral's talent and knew that Oral wanted to get out of where he was. So Oral ran away from home and left home at 16. While playing on a basketball tournament one night, he collapses as he's about to make a layup on a basketball tournament and collapses on the court and begins to cough, and he comes conscious. He comes back to his consciousness. He's coughing, and blood is coming out of his nose. He could not stand up. The coach came out, and the game, of course, stopped. Oral could not stand. And the coach said, Oral, I'm going to take you back to your mom and dad. So the home that he ran from, the parents he didn't want to listen to anymore, back to the same bed, the same room, same house, same person, and his mom and dad that he ran from. He's laid in the bed, and doctors start coming, and they'd quietly talk outside of the room, and he could hear by the sound of the crying and the tone of the conversations that it wasn't good news. And so finally, his parents told him, you're going to die of TB unless God does a miracle. The doctors had said, you've got tuberculosis, and in those days, tuberculosis, or TB as it's called for short, was a killer. There was no cure. There was no medicine. Most people that got TB died of it. And here is a young man, 17 years old, on his deathbed, dying, coughing every night and every day, and parts of his lung and blood coming up out of him onto the pillow and on the sheet. He's losing weight, and he becomes frail. The little ladies would come and pray for him, and other folks would come to pray for him, and most of them didn't know how to pray the prayer of faith to raise somebody up from the bed of sickness and death. They just prayed, oh, God, if it be your will, help him, and if not, prepare him for his passing on and crossing over. No wonder some people ran from the church. You hear those kind of prayers and talk. It's better to be by yourself than to have people telling you God's going to get you to prepare you to take you on the other side. When you're 17, you don't want to die. When you're 17, you want to live, you want to thrive, you want to enjoy, you want to do, you want to accomplish. And sickness had come into his body and put him on his back. And there was no hope. According to everything he heard, he was going to die. His sister Jewel came into his room one afternoon and said 7 words that put hope into his heart. She walked in with a certain tone and disposition that made an impact and penetrated all the thoughts and the words that he'd heard from everybody else. And she said, Oral, God's going to heal you. It's nice to speak good words to people, especially when they're down and out. Oral, God's going to heal you. He said back to Jill, do you really think that God could heal me? Do you really think that God wants to raise me up? Do you think that? She goes, yes, Oral, God's going to heal you. He grabbed a hold of those words and began to have hope that something good might happen to him. That evening, I should say a couple of days later, his father says, Oral, I'm not sure you're right with God. And I'm going to kneel at the end of your bed, and I'm not going to get off of my knees until you get right with God. If you leave this world, you're not going to go to hell. I want to make sure that you go to heaven. So he got on his knees at the end of Oral's bed where he was dying. Oral would turn his back and go to sleep, and he'd wake up and look down, and his dad would still be there. He was about to say something to his father. All of a sudden, something supernatural happened. His face of his father disappeared, and the face of Jesus appeared. And all of a sudden, the transition from Oral being a non-saved person began to change. In that moment, in that time of that experience, when he came out of that vision, his dad led him to the Lord and he accepted Christ as his Savior. Oral Roberts had just gotten saved. He was dying, but now at least he knows where he's going to spend eternity. He's going to go to heaven. But then Oral thought, after feeling the joy of salvation, why would God save me and still let me die? Those are honest questions that a sick person will have. If God is so great and God is so kind, why can't he fix this too? Well, his brother had been visiting a tent meeting not far from where they lived. He and his family had been going to the tent meeting, and the preacher there was actually praying for the sick, and they were getting healed. He leaned over one night after seeing a miracle happen, and he says to his wife, I think we should bring Oral here, and God could heal him here in this meeting. And the wife encouraged the husband to say, okay, yes, let's go talk to Oral and to the family, and let's see if they'll come. So they drove over and came into the house and almost didn't even ask, just kind of told him, Oral, we're going to take you to a tent meeting where a man is praying for the sick and they're getting healed, and I think God can heal you there. He was frail. They wrapped him up in the sheets of the bed and on a mattress and put him in the back of the car with his family and drove him from the house to the tent meeting and put him in the chair for the back of the tent. A man named George Muncie was the preacher. A small tent. He didn't like being in churches because pastors and him would have arguments, so he just built a tent and would have a tent meeting, and he would pray for the sick. And Oral was the last person that night to be prayed for. You don't have to be the first. You don't have to be the middle. You don't have to be the last. But in this case, Oral Roberts was the last man to be prayed for that night in the prayer line. Oral said, I never heard a prayer like that in my life. For the first time in my life, I heard a man that didn't talk to Jesus. He talked to the disease in my body and told it what to do. He laid his hands on me and commanded that tuberculosis to die and to come out of him. And he said, when he gave that command of faith, he said, I breathed down to the depths of my lungs for the first time after a long time. Oral Roberts had just been healed. The young man had gotten saved a few days before, and now he's in a tent meeting where a man of God knew how to curse disease and make it leave a body in Jesus' name. When that command of faith came with confidence, the power of God struck the lungs of Oral Roberts and healed him, and he breathed down into his lungs for the very first time. Oral Roberts had been healed. When he goes home, it would take him almost 2 weeks to get all of his strength back, and even longer for certain aspects for him to have full capacity. Sometimes it takes a while once you're healed for the rest of your body to catch up, for it to recover from all that it has gone through. So Oral began to recover and become a perfectly, totally healed young man. But with that, he had now given his life to Jesus. He had now been healed, and now he was out preaching with his father, giving testimony of how he was rejecting God and running from God, and he fell on a basketball court, and God brought him home and saved his soul, and then healed his body and told him the great line. Actually, to be truthful to the story, on the way from the house to the tent, Oral heard God's voice for the first time. He said, I'm going to heal you tonight, and I want you to build me a university. Now, that's kind of powerful that on the way to your miracle, you're given your command and your commission and your duty. Take my healing power to your generation and build me a university, because I'm going to heal you tonight. Were the three things that God told Oral on the way to the tent. Thank God that he speaks to people how they hear and understand. Oral would travel around, and pastors would see this sharp young man with an ability to speak and on fire and passion, and they begin to book him for their own revival meetings. So Oral Roberts' ministry began by him giving testimonies with his father and now his own meetings. So he's quite successful with what I would call the Midwestern Pentecostal group. But in the middle of all this, he becomes successful, and he's a young man, and so he's now living for Christ and doing what he thinks is right before God, and his family's helping him. And he decides, I need to get married. I need to take that step in my life. I'm working for God now, and it's good that a man of God is married. And so he began to discuss this with one of his friends, and he wrote down 10 things he wanted in a wife. Now, I'm going to take the moment, and I'm going to go through them with you. I want to write this down because one of the great problems with the generals that we have today and throughout history is they marry the wrong people. So all of you that are watching me, please do your best to marry the right person and to partner with the right person in your life. Don't just follow your hormones or your emotions or the advice of others. Get the counsel of God. And so he was talking with his friend. He said, here are the things that I want in a wife. He said, number one, she must love God and have some background as mine. She must be intelligent and up to date in God's world and in secular society. So his first requirement was she must love God and have a similar background and must have intelligence enough to understand God's world and the natural world around about her. And then he said, she must understand in her heart of hearts what my calling from God is and not fight me on it, but cooperate with it as part of her own commitment to the Lord. All right, let me say that one again. She must understand in her heart, deep down in her heart, his calling, and not fight him with it, but cooperate with him as it is a part of her own commitment to the Lord. He said, she must have a good figure, be attractive, and cause me to want to be with her all the time and be able to satisfy me. He also said she must love children and want her own family. He goes on to write and said she must be industrious and not lazy, a good housekeeper and one that loves to keep things in order. She must be calm in her demeanor, not given to fits of rage or jealousy or impatience. Life with me would put enough demands on her. He would later say, thank God she had a calm disposition. She must be a good conversationalist, someone that I can talk to and be my sounding board and be able to be heard and be able to have feedback, someone that I can talk with. She must have a backbone, be willing to stand up to me when I'm wrong or when my temper gets out of control, and still knows that she cares for me, but have the ability to say, Oral, you're wrong. Oral, that's not right. Oral, get your temper in check. He wanted that in his wife. She must love me and marry me for life, to be my helpmate, not until someone better comes by or when things get a little rough, you fall out and you run away. How you like that list? Maybe I should make a little pamphlet and send it out to everybody. 10 things Oral Roberts wanted in a wife. Have you thought through that yourself? Most of you don't think that way. That's why you married the wrong person. The generals I got behind me, other ones that I've studied, I'm asked all the time, why do great men have problems? Well, here's one. It's not the only reason. They marry the wrong person. So slow down the kissing until you know that it's God, and then speed it up and enjoy it. But if it's not the right one, stop kissing, because after the second or third kissing session, you go deaf and you can't hear God, you can't hear your family, you can't hear your pastor, and you probably can't even hear your own honest heart until 6 months to a year after the honeymoon's over. And then it's a little bit too late to find out, is this the right person? You've already made a decision. So we want you to be able to live with the person, work with the person, and obey God together. And he found a woman named Evelyn who met that criteria. In 1936, he and she were in a band in a camp meeting. They both were playing the guitar, and sit down next to Evelyn, and he'd come in a little bit late and his hair was not quite in place, and he was tuning his guitar, getting ready for the Pentecostal Holiness Camp meeting, be a part of the band. And he asked this lady next to him, young girl, is my hair okay? And she said, it's fine. In that moment, Evelyn would know that this is my husband for life. She'd go home after that service and write in her diary, I've met the man I'm going to marry, and I met the man I'm going to work with God. I've met him. But after a while, he didn't really recognize her. He was busy about other things. Long story short, they were introduced by letter, and they began to date by correspondence. Now, that seems kind of strange to us today, but I guess back in those days, writing one another is one way to get to know each other and to communicate. And finally, after many letters and falling in love, and they wanted to be together, he decided, I should go see her. He was living in Oklahoma, and she was a school teacher in Corpus Christi, Texas. He had to drive 600 miles for his first date with Evelyn Roberts, and he had an interesting person with him. His mother, Mama Roberts, said, "I'm going with you, or we're not going to let you make a mistake." So on their first date together, after they decided to get married and to come together through letters, he shows up with his mom. And Evelyn never says a word. And on the way home, after spending several days with the family, everything was concluded that it was of the Lord, and everybody said yes. Mama Roberts, on the way back home to Oklahoma, said, "Oral, that's the right woman. I give my blessing, get married." So on Christmas Day, December 25th, 1938, at 3 p.m., Oral Roberts marries Evelyn, and they live happily ever after to the end of their life, and they never, ever thought of leaving each other. I wanted to end this segment with this story. I had Oral and Evan Roberts preach in my church many times in Southern California. They lived out in Newport Beach during this time, the latter part of their life. And I had Brother Roberts preaching in my church, and we had catered a meal in our church to have lunch with them. And I had Oral and Evan in front of me, and me and my family and team was sitting in front of them, facing each other at the table. And I thought, this is the moment to ask this question so I can see Brother Roberts' response to the answer that I'm going to get. I looked at Mrs. Roberts, Evelyn Roberts, Oral's wife, and I said, "Mrs. Roberts, what's it like living with Oral Roberts?" And I kind of pointed at him like Oral Roberts. And so Oral, we kept eating, and she put down her fork and knife and sat and thought for a moment, and the time went a bit longer than what we were waiting for, and Oral got a little bit nervous and said, "Well, honey, what's the answer to that?" She said, "Give me a minute." She thought for a little bit longer, so I thought, this is going to be very exciting to see what she's going to say. And so she looks at me and says with the most sincere tone about her, "Stressful. Living with Oral Roberts is stressful." And Brother Roberts looking like what? What do you mean? She goes, "Now, I wish I had a film of it." She goes, "Now, Oral, you're the greatest preacher I've ever heard in my life. I'd rather hear you preach more than anybody else. You are the greatest preacher I've ever known. I love you. But you have to admit, living with you has been stressful. I wake up some days to go get the dry cleaning, and helicopters follow me to the dry cleaners. I go to a grocery store, and some people will walk around on the other aisle because they don't want to be near a Roberts person."